Today I'm going to give my review on the latest animated TV show that is making waves, Invincible. Now, I am putting myself at risk because this is a show that a lot of people like, and I just want to be honest about it. And some of my critique is negative. I'm sorry, but I gotta be honest. I know a lot of people think this is the best show on earth, and that's just not the case with me after I watched it. So if you guys don't know about the show or you want to hear how I found out, basically I follow, he's one of my favorite YouTubers. He has been for a while, RDC World, RDC World 1, and he has like millions of subscribers. He does these like anime slash sports slash cartoons, comedic skits, and he's just very, very good at it. And he just kind of gets me because I love anime and all that anime stuff. Not so much the basketball or football, but anime I really love. And I really just love his humor. And it just really works. He has a whole team of people, his local friends, and I'm very happy for his success. Anyhow, he did a video recently, I think about a month ago, where it was abnormal because he was just sitting there and he reviewed this new show called Invincible on Amazon Prime. And he just sat there and talked about how flawless this was. And I was intrigued. So I was like, man, this must be some epic show. Because I usually agree with him. His name's Mark. I usually agree with Mark 100%. And I'm like, I got to check out this show. So it was on Amazon Prime. I was also surprised to find it was only 8 episodes long. I was like, wow, that's a very short show so far. How can it really build up in just 8 episodes? And so without further ado, I kind of want to give my review of the show. I'm going to give my non-spoiler version, short version, and then jump into the spoilers where I can really go into depth about all the stuff I didn't really like about the show. But I'll tell you what I did like and what I didn't in this non-spoiler version first, which is basically I thought that the voice acting was on point. I thought the different heroes and people that were created were pretty cool as well. Almost up to par with One Punch Man, but I think One Punch Man has a more unique super powered universe. And I think there's a lot of good plot twists. They're very good with their gore too. Like you could tell they're definitely trying to spin it in a different way than the cliche, because right off the bat, well, not right off the bat, but later on in the show, you see a lot of horrific, almost gore when people die. It's not always like very clean, and you don't see the blood and guts spilling everywhere like you might in real life. So they did have a more mature lean on that, sometimes with people's heads just exploding or guts dripping out. I also think that there was a lot of unique parts to the whole universe there. As far as things I didn't like, and this is where I really have to dive in, some of the plot was predictable. A lot of the dialogue and the relationships between characters were just not realistic and didn't make sense. And I'll dive that into more detail in the spoiler section of this video. And then some of the build up and payoff was just really not there. I saw it coming, and I just felt like how they ended up, how people end up dealing with things, it just seemed rather like I'd seen it before somewhere else, or you know, it was just kind of bizarre how they interpreted or reacted to things. And there's a lot of areas where it was just clearly quite literally made so that they were just kind of painting over it to move the plot forward in a way that didn't always make sense, in literal ways and in story dialogue ways as well. And by literal ways, I mean even the animation, there are points in it where it's just like, really, that doesn't make sense. One scene is where the main character's best friend goes to his house, and he hasn't been there in many days, and he fixes up the mail, and there's like all this mail in a mess there. It takes him like half a second to just like wipe his hand over it, and all of it gets sorted in an orderly way. Now, mind you, this guy has no superpowers. It was just, I think, poor animation there, where they didn't take the time to make it more realistic. And all of a sudden, he sorted all the mail, sorted all the big packages on the ground in like a half second. Not because he had superpowers, but because, you know, they didn't give enough animation time to really make it more realistic. So there's certain like drops in quality here and there that I was just like, really, you're trying to make it realistic and then you do something like this. But let's get into the real meat of it. And at this point, this is the spoilers section. So if you don't mind me spoiling some parts of it to kind of drill down onto what I didn't like about the show, now is the time to just be ready, because I will be spoiling some of it. Overall, is the show worth watching? I think it's a nice popcorn show. I would give it a solid 7 out of 10. But yeah, it's not something I'll write home to about. Now that we're in the spoiler section, there's a lot I want to say. First and foremost, the ending. So, out of the blue, with no explanation, no words or anything, he just shoots off into space, and Omni-Man just leaves the world and supposedly leaves the galaxy. Now, all of a sudden, everyone else, the whole world basically, the civilians, Cecil and the whole government organization, his mom, Invincible himself, everyone is just like, oh yeah, back to normal. He's not going to come back with the army. He's not going to come back with more Viltrumites and take over. Oh, he's just back to normal. Everything is at peace again. Everything is fine again. And I was just like flabbergasted for the next like 10 minutes when they didn't explain that. And Cecil's just like, yeah, back to normal. You know, we got these proxies for you so you can, you know, recover, and then you'll go back to your normal life as much as possible. And I'm like, are you serious? He didn't proclaim that he had given up or that he was never coming back. For me, it seemed like Omni-Man was still on a vengeance to take over the world. Maybe he just had to spend, he went back to the Viltrumites to get more reinforcements, or he just went off for a small hiatus to think things over. Who doesn't know? Eventually, after like 10 minutes, they do get to a point where Invincible is on Mars with that alien, and then they explain it a bit more, where the alien explains like it's not normal for a Viltrumite to ever leave his post. And so, but Cecil and the whole like FBI or CIA or whatever, the government, everyone else, even the wife of Omni-Man, they didn't know that. So it just seems so illogical for them to just be like, oh yeah, everything's fixed now. He's passed away and that's the end of it. Or just for them to immediately conclude that he had just given up forever and that everything was good. It just didn't make sense. And then when Invincible said, oh, I'm going to be ready for them, when they mentioned that more Viltrumites, maybe a whole army, may come and take over the planet, that also was just kind of like out of the blue. Like, how on earth do you possibly think you could ever be ready when you couldn't even take down one of them? And it was never even mentioned that this Viltrumite was even, like, he was a top officer, but it seemed like there was a whole horde of Viltrumites in that flashback who were maybe just as strong, if not stronger. And for him to just proclaim like, oh yeah, this intergalactic empire, I'm going to be ready for them, it's just ridiculous and stupid. No matter how hard you train, you have no chance. And for him to just kind of state that, it seemed cheesy, it seemed ridiculous as well. The whole character transition from Omni-Man being this guy who had supposedly been this, learned to be a more caring, loving protector of the earth for 20 years, and then all of a sudden, on a dime, reveal his true intentions, and then reveal how cruel and insignificant he saw all these people and his wife. It just seemed a bit unrealistic too, almost as if they were really wanting to all of a sudden paint the picture of him being a really bad villain. You saw how caring and kind he was for all those moments, and for him to just say like the humans are insignificant, or not to even understand why humans are insignificant, it seemed ridiculous. At the least, you would have been able to tangibly describe and understand why other humans value human lives and so forth, and rather than just demolish the planet. And that leads to another question. Why on earth is Omni-Man staying there for 20 years? Why would a Viltrumite empire send their top officers to these seemingly insignificant planets with power levels much lower than them and have them infiltrate that place for 20 plus years with no contact with the empire before just demolishing it, when they could have done that given how strong they are initially? It just seems like a very inefficient way of doing it. Skip the 20 years, just go into the planet and take it over. That seemed to be the plan, with at least in the flashback, it seemed to be how it was. But for some reason, he had to infiltrate himself for 20 years in this planet, pretend to be some protector or superhero in that planet with all the others, and then when the time came, finally reach back out to the Viltrumite Empire, which I guess he lost contact with for 20 years, and who knows what's happened in that time. And then only then can you take out the planet, which he could have done in 20 minutes if he really wanted to when he first landed on the planet. So that just didn't make sense either. That was never explained. There are other parts of just small parts of dialogue and exchange that were just kind of illogical to me. One of them being the whole thing with the pink suited superhero. I think her name's Adam Eve. She was cheated on by this other member of the Guardians of the Globe, and then a few episodes later she comes back to them, hugs him, and then now they're part of a team again. It's the Guardians of the Globe and then her working together, and all of a sudden it's all made up. It's like all of a sudden, like, that doesn't happen in real life. You don't get cheated on and then you feel so hurt, and then after a few weeks or whatnot, you're just back to normal, and then you're lovey-dovey with them and you're on the same team. It didn't make sense at all. And then with the whole Guardians of the Globe second iteration, you know, the first one was destroyed by Omni-Man, and that was pretty cool. That was a nice plot twist. That was when I was like, okay, this might be something really fresh, really interesting. When Omni-Man just straight up slaughtered the Guardians of the Globe, which were clearly modeled after the Justice League. But then they created a second version. They recruited these new team members to create the second version of the Guardians of the Globe. And that was just flabbergasting as well. They appoint this robot guy to recruit them. And at first, it seems like he had a very rational, logical, wise understanding of how to recruit them. Because not only did he factor in fighting capabilities, but also teamwork, character, nobility, and so forth. And I was like, okay, that's nice. And then I was wildly disappointed a few moments later when you actually see the team and how they failed to work together dysfunctionally for the next few episodes. And you're like, they have no agreeableness, no friendliness at all. Well, it's like two or three of them especially that are really causing that. And they kind of just clash heads. One's a big asshole, constantly a douchebag, doing his own thing, disrespecting the others, and not even in a fun, clever way, just in a really bizarre and constantly jarring way. And for some reason, they have to tolerate it. That would never happen in a real world-class organization, because they value teamwork, they value collaboration and respect, and that guy would have never been recruited in the first place. And he would have been fired long ago. But it was just constant disrespect. He was constantly like disobeying the rules, basically not even showing an openness to learn and grow. The one guy pointed out, hey, you killed all these civilians because you were selfish in the way that you rescued them. And instead of acknowledging that, he was just like, screw you, I'm not going to train. And that repeated type of stuff would never actually last. Whether that's a basketball team or a global corporation, they would never let that slide repeatedly. So that was just ridiculous too. And then in terms of dialogue and interplay, there's a lot of bizarre moments that just didn't make sense. One being when the dialogue between Beast Woman or whatever her name is that transforms into a green monster in the second iteration of the Guardians of the Globe, and then that asshole guy, that whole exchange was kind of bizarre. Like, they got into a ridiculous fight. None of them restrained them from fighting when they just yelled stop, stop, which doesn't make sense given they have powers to fight. And the whole fight was also kind of ridiculous. Like, he caused it himself by being a dick, and it was just ridiculous on multiple parts. The robot, bad call on him too. The robot characterization didn't even make sense. You think, okay, he's a robot, he has no emotions, he's AI. That made sense for a while. There was a lot of kind of like retroactive writing, in my opinion. It's like they painted it this way, and then like a few months later, while writing the comics, they're like, oh no, we're gonna change it and make it like this. But by doing that retroactive writing kind of destroys the characterization of the first few months. And what I mean by that is, towards like one of the final episodes, you find out the robot is not an actual robot, but a human in a robot body. Which begs the question, why were there all these scenes where they made him so that he had like a lack of emotions and he was almost kind of too mechanical? He was a human from the start, so like that doesn't make sense. Granted, to their point, there was that one scene where they did kind of hint at that, where where he was basically like, I relate more than you think. I know what it's like to be trapped in a body that's not the body you want and stuff like that. But still, it's just kind of ridiculous. I mean, there were some good moments when he did clone himself and stuff. That was a very touching moment that I had no qualms about. I mean, that was pretty good from start to finish. But also, they would leave these hints of like, what the heck? That's kind of strange. And then they wouldn't go anywhere with that. Or maybe they were kind of bookmarking that for a future season. I mean, the robot basically went behind their backs, collaborated with criminals, broke them out of jail, caused them to clone him, a version of a teammate he admired for his genetics. It was all kind of creepy in a way, but he did it for the right reasons, I guess, and then took the criminals back to jail. But there were other moments of just kind of bizarreness, of kind of character relationships and dialogue that wasn't really natural or would make sense in the real world. Another case in point is Invincible and his girlfriend. At first it was like, okay, pretty standard stuff. He kept lying and about why he kept having to cancel dates and stuff, and then the girlfriend got mad. Simple, makes sense, right? Then it just got weird and bizarre and didn't make sense because it kept happening over and over, and the girlfriend clearly kept getting mad and feeling let down. Still makes sense, right? But then it just keeps happening, and you're just like, why don't you just tell her? And how hasn't she caught on? Like, that doesn't make sense, how he keeps missing stuff all the time. There comes a point where you just keep missing stuff, and then at the least she would get jealous or maybe skeptical and think either he's cheating on him or maybe he's a superhero and he's doing something else. But they kept playing on that, and it seems like they broke up, and then he promised to never do it again like 3 times, which was just like too much, maybe even 4 times. And then they just keep playing on the fact that she keeps getting upset over it, to the point where now there's one moment where he basically has to disappear like Superman and then will come back as Invincible, and then she gets all pissed off because he ran away like a coward, when in reality he had to transform into Invincible to save the day. And then it's revealed, oh, she was smart enough to have figured it out many weeks ago. She had already known that he was invincible, and the real reason she was truly mad was because she didn't like that he wouldn't reveal his secret identity to him, and that was a insult to their trust and relationship. And I'm just like, how does that make sense? So you decided to take that out in the most bizarre way by acting like you were scared or that you were upset with him just not being there all the time, and you think that he would just indirectly pick that up, that the real reason was he didn't reveal his secret identity. That doesn't make sense. And then to top it all off, you got so offended because he ran off as a coward, and that was another sign of trust breaching. I guess that makes sense, but like just kind of strange in a way. And yeah, it was just very weird, but there you go. And then there's that whole, I liked a lot of the characters in the show, to be honest. There's that demon detective guy, like such an innovative character, and then all the government assault officers. They had like invisible like coloring. They could turn it on and off. And here's the thing, though, they were surveying Omni-Man from across the street with all that equipment, and then I guess they had some type of spy cameras planted throughout the area. And despite all that, you're telling me Omni-Man, who's basically like invincible, like literally invincible, who probably has like all the things Superman has, hyper hearing, all this stuff, like he could basically, they show him many times being able to sense when there's people in the house, even though they're invincible or invisible. And yet you're telling me he couldn't notice all the spy cameras in his house and spy microphones, and the fact that there's an entire brigade of people spying on him through those cameras in the house next door. Like, you're telling me he's not able to detect stuff like that? I doubt it. I think he would have been able to detect it long ago. That was a miswrite in the script, I think. So I know some people who are big fans of the show. I know Mark, I'm a huge fan of Mark, and if he ever watches this, probably won't, but I'm putting myself at risk by saying I don't like the show, but I want to be honest and give some different perspectives. Still a huge fan of Mark, and I know he's like a huge fan of the show. He's like, anyone who doesn't like that, we're just not on the same page, and he's like definitely much more into the show. But I align with Mark of RDC World in many other ways, and I like a lot of other shows, and I mostly agree with him when he says certain shows like Hunter x Hunter are great. But it just goes to show you that opinions are not always the same, and I just found certain elements of the show, maybe it's because I've just gotten so much high standards after watching so much good entertainment over the years, but I was just like, this is not that great, honestly. It was just kind of okay at best. I mean, here's another thing. They revive the Immortal on the final episode, and what do they do with him? He just blindly, with rage, charges back at Omni-Man and gets killed again. Like, what was the point of all that? If you're going to revive like a Guardian of the Globe again, add it to some greater part of the plot. Maybe that was the undetected factor that was going to maybe tip the scales. But nope, he just blindly, with rage, flies back at Omni-Man, and he basically is like seems like a weaker version of Omni-Man. Both very muscular, both with super strength, both can fly. It was just like, okay, what's the deal here? And then he gets a hole punch through him and dies. So it's like, okay, he dies again a second time. What was the point of that? I guess it was just to add to the final fight, to add to the final part of it. I guess towards the ending credit of the final episode, they do show them trying to revive the Immortal a third time, but it was, or I guess a second time, but a lot of it was just like ridiculous. And then Cecil, being how incredible he is, he just kind of concludes, oh, well, that's wrapped up, without really having any caution to the wind that there's an entire Viltrumite empire out there that they need to prepare themselves for. I mean, sure, they have him collaborating with that weird geek to build all these robot monsters, like a whole army of them, but that's not going to stop a Viltrumite. So all in all, I guess, they are preparing, but all of it just seemed rather incongruent in certain ways. Why did they really take out Detective Demon? Anyhow, as you can see, I could rant on and on about parts of the show that were just kind of weird. Um, Invincible's mom too, like parts were kind of good, and then it was just like, what is going on here? Um, that being said, I think I found it entertaining enough. Would I be super super excited about this show coming back for another season? No. Will I watch it? Possibly, probably. Um, but I don't think it was flawless from beginning to end like RDC World. I thought it was good popcorn entertainment. I think maybe it's because my standards for good television or story have gotten higher, or maybe it's just the law of the numbers. At some point, someone is just going to have some negative opinion about something, regardless. You expose it to a large audience, there's always going to be someone who's a critic. And this may be the one time that I am. And so that's it. Invincible, is it worth watching? I think so, but I would curb your expectations. You may like it. You might say it's the greatest thing on earth, but I don't know. I think it was all right, and I that's my review. Like and subscribe. See you later.